Howdy y'all, it's Cody from the Keepers of Nerddom. How you doing? So it's happening. The Necron's Codex has finally released. As you're watching, obviously I'm going to be building a version of a Tau Tetra and just enjoy it. It's just kind of something to have on as we talk through this, because I think Games Workshop is experiencing something before our eyes that I should have been more aware of sooner, and I wasn't. And for that, I'm sorry. I'm sorry to all of you, because I think we all need to be very aware of this, even the people that still think everything is okay. So at the beginning of 10th edition, everything changed pretty drastically. And by pretty drastic, I mean like extremely. Leaders were back in squads, and that was a thing in 7th or 8th edition. I think it might have been even older than 8th, but I don't remember for sure because I wasn't playing yet. I started in 9th edition just thinking, man, Necrons look really cool. And now here we are in the 10th, and I've got Necrons in Tau and working on all of that, and it's a lot of fun. But 10th, leading up to it, they said a few things. They said, first off, that it's going to be new. It's going to be different. It's going to be fascinating, the changes that we're going to see. And there was a lot of hype on it because it gave us a lot of time to prepare. And they slowly released little snippets of it, right? So this big change they actually released over time with smaller changes, like, you know, pieces of the change over time. Good idea, right? Very, very good idea. And one of the promises too that I if memory serves, was that they wanted to get away from rerolls because it just bogged the game down, that it was just too much. And yeah, rightfully so, because there's some factions that just rerolled like crazy. Now, this whole idea that really beyond the rerolls they were really promising was simplification, and they said that several times, that they wanted to simplify the game. Now, if I asked you at this point, especially those of you that have codexes now, does the game feel more simple? I think there are parts of it, right? Factions are easier to figure out. There's less stratagems and equipment. So there are things that are more simple. There are things, though, that at times are almost more complicated. And it's not actually because everything on the data sheets are necessarily complicated. You know, because whenever we first released for each faction, we had one, what do we call it technically? Army rule, that's it. And, you know, Necrons had a really good one of +1 to hit, and Tau have a really good one of being able to spot for other units, so they become the observer unit for another unit, so they get a +1 to their ballistic skill. And also, if they have the marker like keyword, they ignore cover. Really neat stuff. But it was very different because also, for example, Tau, they lost the idea of drones being actual models on the field. This is a big change, right? And not having been into Tau yet, that was exciting to get into them because I hadn't experienced what they were before. I'd heard a lot of stuff just on like Reddit threads that survivability because you could stack a lot of drones. While that may not necessarily add for good gameplay to everyone else on the board, it was a core tenet, if you will, of their play style. And I think that's important to note. So we came into 10th expecting rapid or massive changes, but we were also given previews prior to the 10th edition coming out, which is really good. It's really smart, you know? If you're not able to make small changes over time and you're going to make a big change, how do you make it seem like small changes? You do previews, right? And you prepare the people for it by giving previews so that it doesn't all feel like it's just this massive dump of information on that day. Now, it still was, because the previews didn't give the full picture. It was just like, here's a data sheet or two, here's a weapon or two, and here's your army rule and maybe an enhancement and a stratagem, stuff, you know, at least one of some pieces of it. And then we got into 10th edition, and then the codexes started rolling out. And not being a Tyranids or Space Marine player, I didn't experience it, but my understanding is there were some pretty massive changes to those factions. So first off, it's interesting to note with this that there were people that already said they were out for 10th edition whenever everything kind of hit, because it was just massive changes. And it's easy to look at them and go, they told us there would be changes. move on, right? Like, play the game. It's okay. But in thinking about it more and more, and especially with what's going on now, because especially in the Necrons, like, groups that I'm a part of, there's a lot of, obviously dissension among the ranks. There's a lot of frustration. There's a lot of, I'm not happy. Well, why is a person not happy? Often it's because there's a massive change in how a thing functions. And I want to go into some of the specifics of that as well in a moment. But the first big concept I think is really important is just overall this whole idea that there ends up becoming 2 or 3 groups out of this. There's the middle group that's just kind of whatever, I'll work with it, but I'm not necessarily really happy about it. Then there's the I'm not happy, and here's why, because X, Y, and Z. And then there's the other side of the group. And the other side of the group is very fascinating because you can see it even now in Facebook groups for Necrons, especially because I'm a part of them. I'm imagining AdMech has similar that go, stop complaining, stop whining. You knew changes were coming. Just accept them. Be happy. And Games Workshop, whether they realize it or not, has done something very, very unwise when they make these massive, massive changes. And I want to go into those here in a moment, because massive changes, especially with little to no previews, because there were previews of at least one of the Hypercrypt Legion and some other little pieces, but not enough, because the other things that were changing were the data sheets. And the fact that we have people now that just look at others and say, just be happy. And then there's other parts of the group that go, I can't get behind this. This is irritating, and I'm out, and we'll just play with the stuff as it sits right now. Well, what Games Workshop has done is divided the fan base. And with massive changes, if you're not careful, you divide a fan base. And this happens in anything and everything, right? It becomes in businesses, in even schools, in even churches, that if you make too massive of changes without preparing people for it, they will be very, very upset and not be on board for at least part of them, and then others will be. But the problem, what you're doing is dividing the fan base. So first off, before we get to some of the examples in the Warhammer stuff and why it's actually even more nefarious and messed up than just that, take you back to Marvel, Disney Marvel for a moment here. Captain Marvel was a movie that happened before Endgame, the Avengers Endgame, and made over $1 billion. And people actually said it's a great film. It has to be amazing because it made over $1 billion. No. That being said, what's interesting about it is you could not convince those people that they were incorrect. Even to this day, as we're watching the Marvels crash and burn and making no money comparatively at all, especially according to the budget that they're supposed to be making, right? Very, very serious numbers. I think it's less than 200,000 right now as far as what it's made worldwide, something crazy. And what we're really seeing is a fan base that's been divided over time with the more recent phases of Marvel that have not been of the highest quality comparatively to what has happened before. And that's an important note. Like, Marvel messed up, and they didn't learn the lesson of Disney Star Wars, because Disney Star Wars had the similar problem happen. They made films that a lot of people loved and were excited and went, Rey and Finn and Poe and Kylo Ren are amazing, and they're the bestest ever, and we love them, only to alienate other people that were saying, no, that these things that are happening in this film do not make sense. And to be really fair to it, the people that said it doesn't make sense, they were correct. The people that were saying Captain Marvel isn't a good movie, they were correct. They were recognizing the writing on the wall before other people. But that's the interesting thing. People, some of them are able to recognize quickly that a thing is breaking or broken. And others will not recognize it until it's far too late, and they'll look around and go, huh, I think Star Wars isn't very good anymore. And sometimes even then they'll start going, oh, I knew it all along. And you're like, yeah, you're a liar. But it's a sad thing because they alienate other people. The people that are negative are alienating themselves from it because they've decided it's not worth being a part of, which is a very sad state of affairs. And so this is an interesting thing that I think Games Workshop actually has caused for themselves as well in their own domain of Warhammer 40K. Because the fact that there are people on Reddits and Facebook groups and wherever else, some saying these changes are drastic and insane, and I'm not really happy about it. And then there's others saying, just be happy, you knew this was coming, just accept it. That's not a good sign. That's a really bad sign, because what that's saying is the fan base is fragmenting, and who's to blame for that? The answer very clearly is Games Workshop, and unfortunately people tend to blame one another because their emotions are high, they're frustrated, they're sharing their initial thoughts in a moment, and it should be able to be that their thoughts are shared. Unfortunately, there is a large segment of people in our world that will look at a thing that is burning down and go, this is fine. Or I don't want to rock the boat because I need the job, and stay on and keep a thing going for a lot longer than it has any right to. It's a very interesting and bizarre issue, because this causes businesses and game companies and other organizations to last longer than their best before date, because some people just don't want to rock boats. They're not wired like that. They're not designed like that. And I think that's important to have people like that, because they're often the dreamers, are the ones willing to go to the ends of the earth to do the hard stuff. And they're important. But they also tend to not recognize when a thing is breaking in front of their eyes. I think that's interesting. I think that's an important note here. Now, that being said, I didn't notice the Space Marine or Tyranids changes. Why not? Well, don't play them. Their changes didn't matter directly to me. So in a way, I was part of that problem, because I was just on the fence of, well, really just kind of in that middle, not running away from Games Workshop, but not running to them. And so letting them continue because, well, there's somebody still buying models for Necrons and Tau. So they're not affected. They're not upset. They're just moving on. Now, one thing you have to understand is coming into this game in 9th edition. Well, I understood every, was it 6 months? There was some pretty serious either points changes or points and ability changes. But they were often not like, compared to what we're seeing right now, in a way they weren't massive. And I say that as some of them were massive because they changed the usability of units. But it was a very different change because it was a thing that programmed and accustomed to. Everybody tended to know every 6 months, this is going to happen. They're going to adjust. No, even with this Codex stuff, we knew that there would be changes. However, there's a little bit more detail to this when you pay attention to what's going on. And I think what's going on is the more frustrating thing. So let's go into, well, first off, I do need to talk about rerolls. That's an interesting thing that they said. We're going to do simplification and less rerolls. They have not simplified very much at all, because there's just more layers in different ways, and then adding things into groups makes things more complicated, and rereading rules and re-understanding things. So there's some pieces, yes, that are simplified, but then there's also pieces that are just new that you have to learn. So did it simplify? You could probably make a case that somewhere it did. But where it's interesting was there was also that promise of, hey, we're going to get rid of rerolls. We don't want as many. And it's funny as, well, for Custodes, they still have tons and tons of rerolls. And then for Necrons, now we've got a Legion, the Canoptic Court, that for the Canoptic units, they get to reroll all ones or all hit rolls if they're within their power matrix area, which is really cool. Don't get me wrong, like that's awesome. It's fascinating. I'm excited for the concept of it, but it's also extremely dangerous. And here's why. They said we were going to simplify and there was too many rerolls because it slows down the game. They're correct in that. It does slow down the game. There was a lot of rerolls. And then they proceeded to add rerolls. And so this is a thing that just comes up, and that they get more and more complicated as these codexes come out. And so it's not a simplification so much as we had it more simple at the very beginning because only one army rule for everybody, but everybody started out with index cards that were tried to be played against each other. Were they balanced? No, because Eldari. But that was the idea. Now, that didn't happen, and then we're seeing in Necrons, obviously, Necrons are not balanced in that way as far as rerolls. And I would make a case that maybe they might not be balanced. We'll see. Because I think some factions within them are going to be really good and others are not. You know, the Annihilation Legion is just straight trash, and most people on Reddit even are just like, this is trash and here's why. It doesn't do anything helpful for things other than just a few things, and the bonuses it gives are dependent and not good. It's really weird. Like it's almost like it wasn't play tested very well. But within these books, first off, there's a lot of first offs, as you can tell. The points in the books, they basically have just said, we're going to give you an online document to update your points because those things are just not accurate. And I think they did that with the Space Marine and the Tyranids books, if memory serves. That's a problem because that shows us, yeah, we're printing this. You could buy it for an exorbitant cost, but it's going to have data sheets that are going to change drastically whenever we decide if something gets too strong. And we experienced this in 9th edition. We did. But there wasn't a ton of massive changes that I remember to the data sheets. Yeah, because there was a few things. This, though, is massive changes from the index. And where it gets really complicated, and I think that the people that go, just be happy, just know that there's going to be changes, need to pay attention to something that Games Workshop is doing. And I used to play a game called HeroClix. And I stopped buying HeroClix when I realized that the next set would often be 5% more powerful. And we kind of grew to expect that, but it made it frustrating that it was always buy the next set, buy the next set. And, well, does it make sense that they're doing that? Well, yeah, they want to make money. But it doesn't encourage the fact of collecting and being excited for what you have in the moment versus this idea of just give us more, just consume. And that was very, very frustrating because that shouldn't happen. That really shouldn't happen, where the older stuff that you have is null and void very quickly. And the 5% was frustrating. And I'm being a little hyperbolic in that number because I don't remember the exact percentages, but I started to notice that the next set after would be 6 or 7% or 8 or 9% more powerful than even the last set. And when you started adding up the percent increases of set power, you started to realize that within 6 months, the stuff that you had was basically unplayable in any sort of tournament or even just semi-friendly game setting unless you agreed to certain standards and rules because they were not effective anymore. And at that point I went, you know what? I need to stop buying into this and supporting this because they're just saying buy the same character that's now in this set again because he's better, he's cheaper, he's stronger. She will do better things than the previous edition, and the super rares and the chases and the other secret hidden things you need to have, and you will pay on the secondary market crazy amounts of money, so you better buy an entire case of these. And they increase their prices too, as they said they're increasing their model size to make it more extravagant looking. Well, massive changes very quickly, because sometimes these sets would come out within a month or two of each other. It was bad. It was intense. And you could just tell that it was all a money grab to go, we just want you to buy more product, consume, play games with what you've got, and then buy the new stuff again so you can play new games with the new stuff that you got, and then buy again. And we come over to Games Workshop. And I think the people that just say, just be happy you knew changes were coming, need to really pay attention to this. I think this is really the important factor. Lich Guard for Necrons were a very strong defensive unit that took Cryptex, that had Cryptothralls, and the Cryptothralls were a 4-up Feel No Pain for themselves. So once they were gone, the Feel No Pain was gone. Very, very strong. Very strong. A Lich Guard on their own could take a shield to give themselves a 4-up invuln save, or they could have higher attack with a War Scythe and then take like Organ the Diviner to get a 4-up invuln save as well. But they've changed it now in this Codex that presumably was written long before 10th edition even launched, so it's very strange to see two very different things. But it screams of something very strange. Almost like they intended to do this on purpose a long while back. 10 months to a year or longer. Lich Guard now, they cannot take the Cryptothralls, and the Cryptothralls don't have their 4-up Feel No Pain anymore. They just get an extra wound, so you can still join them into groups with Cryptex, but they don't have the 4-up Feel No Pain, so they're basically next to useless unless they're crazy cheap. And that is a good point that some of the people that are saying, just be happy, this is fair that we don't know the points cost yet. That is true. However, this is a bigger issue. Because the bigger issue in this is the Lich Guard now cannot take Cryptex. None. No Orc and the Diviner, no Technomancer, no Chronomancer, Plasmancer, Psychomancer, none of them. Okay? And so then they can't take the Cryptothralls either, which the Cryptothralls now are basically going to be useless whenever the Codex comes out comparatively to what they were. Unless they're just 10 points for the two of them, then hey, 6 extra wounds, okay, I could pay 10 points. That might change a little bit, granted. But they don't do the same thing that they used to as far as being a defensive shield. So the idea was, okay, we have defensive shields. The Lich Guard were defensive shields that could hold a point. And the Necron Warriors were a defensive shield that could hold a point, that if you built them right, they wouldn't go down. Obnoxious to fight against? Yes, absolutely. However, was it a concept and staple of our builds to keep us in a game because we didn't necessarily have the same amount of damage on a lot of our lower stuff? Yes. So the Codex rolls around. And what we find is obviously Cryptothralls and Lich Guard change. Necron Warriors have several changes to their reanimation, their quote-unquote better weapon goes down to a toughness 4 from a toughness 5. We have several changes to characters, and then something fascinating happens, and this is an interesting thing, and I haven't yet purchased these, and they were on my, at some point, let's go get these, but hadn't yet. Canoptic Wraiths. Well, lo and behold, because last edition I played some proxies just to try them, and I really liked them because they were survivable in 9th edition. They were fun. They were just kind of there as a nuisance, and they usually still went down, but they took a lot of a beating so other stuff could survive. It was kind of fun. Well, all of a sudden they go, yeah, Technomancers can join them, giving their 5-up Feel No Pain to the Canoptic Wraiths. Also, we're going to give an extra wound to them. We don't know the point cost yet. That's true. But we have a 4-up invuln save with toughness 6 with 4 wounds each. Go up to a group of 6 with a Technomancer as well, so 7 total things. And the Technomancer gives a 5-up Feel No Pain, and it can repair them as well on top of their reanimation protocols. And they also, in the Canoptic Court, can get an enhancement on the Technomancer to make them infiltrators. So they can start out in the middle of the board to give your... and they also have a 10-inch movement, I forgot about that. But to get your power matrix started and can take over more of the board. They're extremely survivable. And so it's an interesting note that you go, okay, so they took away all these abilities from Lich Guard to make them not the survivable tanks that they were. In the middle of an edition, right? Like several months into an edition. And then changed it to another thing having the abilities of the Lich Guard, but doing it better, faster, stronger, right? Because the Canoptic Wraiths, they may not hit as often because they're a 4-up to hit on their melee and their weapons now. But they'll have full potential rerolls to hit. And oh, this is just, they're faster. They're so much faster. 10 inches versus the Lich Guard's 5? Yeah, it was like 5. And they can, one group of them can start out in the middle. Does anybody see the problem here? That what Games Workshop really did was made a drastic, massive change that people are freaking out and going, it's all bad, it's crazy, I'm almost done, I'm out. Because it was massive changes, but when you pay attention to it, it almost looks like, and it really does, Games Workshop was going, you know what? Let's make some more money, because we've sold a lot of Lich Guard. And now, when we do this change, we'll put those Lich Guard out at first in the index as this strong and epic and usable, and then with the book, we're going to change it to the Wraiths. And then all of a sudden, it's going to be insane. Absolutely insane. They're going to be amazing. And people are going to have to buy those too. And the Technomancer that somebody may have had 1 or 2 of, well, now they're going to want 3. So they'll buy that too. But the Wraiths, apparently somebody on the Reddit had noticed that they had slowly been going up in price over the past few months. And it's like, oh, that's interesting if that's the case. Don't know. I wasn't paying that close attention to them. It's almost like it's a company trying to get more money out of people by changing things drastically just to make money. Buy more product. Please. Give us your money. Give us more. And that's a very sad place to be in, because if they're not careful, they're going to find themselves where HeroClix has become for me. And that breaks my heart, because I love playing HeroClix. And now, unfortunately, each set comes out and it's so much higher of a percentage better than even the last set, or the points are reduced on effect, so they're more effective for cheaper. That, I mean, there was a point where 2-year-old models were like 150 points, and their counterparts that would do similar things were 75 points in the game. And so you had a very drastic shift in usability that the old stuff couldn't compete up against unless you had some sort of special rules that you did at home. And with stuff like this, with Games Workshop, it's a little different, because they don't have like randomized stuff. You buy what you buy. But they're basically saying, actually, we're changing it now, and this is the good thing. And actually, this time, this is the good thing. And they'll do that in smaller ways, too, with point cost changes to go, ooh, now that's 100 points more. So now this vehicle over here is actually your better bet to use, because we reduced it by 25 points. And now it's really, really usable compared to where it was. So go do that. And we even saw that a little bit in 9th. And it was like, ooh, now that's really good. And I chased after those at times. And once you get all the models, right, or 2 of every model, then all of a sudden, you're set, like, or 2 of every set of models, or whatever you need to, right, to make a full unit twice. Then all of a sudden you can look around and go, I'm ready. I'm ready to actually have this battle. But unfortunately, I think if they're not careful, Games Workshop's going to really hurt themselves, and it's going to slowly separate the fan base. And I don't want that. And I want us to all be able to come around and be like, we are happy, we're excited to play. And I think one of the things that they could do is slow down rotation of editions, because I think 10th edition concept is great, but they need to, do small adjustments. Drop 5 points here, drop a point there on each model in these massive 20-man squads, right? Or go up in a point or 2. And do those kinds of changes so that way the game reflects balancing rather than we just want to make crazy money. Because even if you drop a point or 2, it can shift a little bit of the thinking of, well, this is good, but now this item over here is better. Like this unit, this model. And it still encourages changing of play and potentially getting different models for high-end play, but also even for people that just want to play at home going, you know what, now all of a sudden the death marks are kind of cool. And the immortals are interesting again because they dropped a few points instead of these massive changes where, well, I gotta go get some immortals with this specific weapon. And, well, crud, I didn't magnetize that time. That's the problems that people run into, and sometimes you can't magnetize everything. And it's a very interesting warning that people in this just magnetize because you don't know what's going to change. And the reality is that's really true. It's crazy true. And now I've experienced it and watched it and going, I have so many things in certain builds and certain concepts that I might have to adjust, and some are magnetized, some are not, because I made a choice, and it's a sad place to be at sometimes. But let me know down in the comments below, what do you think about this whole dynamic? It's such a fascinating thing. You know, is this really just a money grab? Because I'm afraid it is, but let me know down in the comments below. Is that what you think as well? I'd love to hear your thoughts, and I hope you've enjoyed me building this Tau Tetra. Yeah, it's a fun model as a side note, and very, very interesting, but it's also, I think, going to be a lot of fun to use. Last thoughts on that are, enjoy the rest of the video watching me finish up the Tau Tetra and get it built. And thank you for hanging out with me. I've been Cody from the Keepers of Nerddom. Like, share, and subscribe. Take care, y'all. Bye.
Caucasian female, 32. Chronic seizure in the bathroom. Control the scan. Where am I? 1, 2, 3. Where am I? 1, 2, 3. You're in the hospital, honey. You're in the hospital. Honey, Mikey's here. And the doctors say he's gonna be okay. Hopefully. Needs to be checked out by the NICU. What happened? He passed out. What? Mikey fell. Has your wife had a seizure before? No. Can't move my head. I wanna see him! He's right here, honey. He's right here. Oh. Tonight. L-word marathon. You watch the L-word? On mute. I'll pass. Dinner with Cuddy. Still sucking up so she'll fund your play space for the chemo kids? They really gotta save their energy for other things, like crying. She's the suck-up. She asked you? She's smart. She knows if she buys me enough alcohol, my defenses just weakened. Doesn't make sense unless you run out of batteries. Hey, I'm recently single. She's single. You're too nice for her to like you. She's not needy enough for you to like her. She's got an agenda, just not one that includes appearance by little Jimmy. I'll pull my peeps. How many of you think that Cuddy asked, or rather Peep?
Chase caught a case in the ER. He wants us to take a look.
Unless Chase broke his neck falling off his polo pony, he had no reason to be in the ER.
Cuddy put him on a 2-week NICU rotation. Patient had an unexplained seizure.
Seizures are cool to watch, boring to diagnose.